Good evening, everybody, and congratulations, Dublin. Congratulations, because for the 4th year running, it's not the most expensive city in Europe anymore. But I just went to O'Brien's because the coffee shop was shut, to buy myself and Neve a cup of coffee, and I paid €6 for this 2 cups of latte. So I don't know whether or not you're going to make it next year. Everything is possible. So, thank you for inviting me. I'm a mongrel. I have an Irish mother, a South African father. I grew up in London. I live in Vienna. I'm married to a Bulgarian. I actually don't know who I am, to be honest. I don't have a formal education, but I can smell what works. Honest. Since I was 13, I sold fruit and vegetables in Covent Garden, and somehow I just get more right than wrong. I can tell what works. And this is an opportunity to sell more than just a product from this country. It's an opportunity to sell a little bit of culture. Because, have a guess, how many Irish passports of living people there are in the world? There are 4.2 million people, I think, live here in the Republic. How many do you think living people have an Irish passport? Hello? 60 million? Anybody else want to have a go at that? That's pretty brave. 25? There are 73 million people in the world who hold an Irish passport, and they are alive. They are alive. Everybody wants to be Irish. Everybody, really. Who else is patron saint do you even know? Really? And there are parades in Melbourne, there are parades in Sydney, there are parades in New York. Of course, they're all immigrants from here at one time. This country is famous. It's more famous than a country of just 4 million people. And of course, culture, arts are kind of behind that. And why not food? Because food is tasty here. Really, food is tasty. You just have to sell it better. Okay, let me tell you a little about the discounters, because that's an interesting story. Why are they actually here? Why did they come to Britain? Why not go to somewhere where people don't have any money, like Bulgaria or Czech Republic? Why Ireland? Why Britain? Discounters look for 3 things in a market that they're going to enter. First of all, they look for a high-wage economy. Now, you're all going to tell me you don't earn enough, so it's not a high-wage economy here, but I promise you, on a global scale, this is a high-wage economy. You have to pay €6 to get 2 cups of coffee. It must be a high-wage economy. It looks for where the industry earns big, fat profits. Big, fat profits. 10% EBITDA, and the discounter starts to get excited. Because when a retailer earns big fat profits, so do the producers, so do the suppliers, and so does the property industry. Everybody kind of cashes in on it a little bit. And it looks for where the property ownership is a surety. In other words, if you invest in property, some smart lawyer somewhere produces a bit of paper that says, as long as you've got this bit of paper, you will always own it. It's not like Russia where Mr. Putin can come along and say, nah, I own it. Since tomorrow, I own it. These kind of economies are not interesting for a discounter because it's going to invest serious money. And finally, it looks for a high standard of living. Why is that? Because it wants the customer to say, actually, I don't eat things I don't like. I basically eat things I like, and I'm at any price not prepared to go below that. They're the 4 elements which have to be ticked before a discounter will be interested in the market. By the way, the high wage economy is because the discounter knows that it can run its business much cheaper in terms of numbers of hours, in terms of numbers of people than its competitors. And if those hours of labour or the weeks of work don't count for anything, because people get paid absolute peanuts like China or India or wherever, it doesn't count for a lot. It doesn't make your product cheaper. So it comes to the country and nobody will talk to it. Not the producers, not the suppliers, not the property people. Nobody will do it because it is a party wrecker. It's come to a country that's earning 7 to 10% EBITDA, and everybody knows, if they've done their homework, these guys, if they get traction, are going to wreck the party. So they have to come with products from abroad. They have to beg, borrow and steal any kind of service. I mean, it's really, really expensive and difficult for a discounter to break into a market like Ireland or Britain. But it's determined to do it because it knows there are rich pickings along the way. It comes with a very specific format. It can't inherit or inhabit somebody else's stores. It needs everything in the same place. If you've seen an Aldi or a Lidl store, 90% of them are identical. And by the way, those 90% are identical around the world. They've all got yellow floor tiles because 750 square meters with those tiles can be cleaned in 22 minutes with a certain machine. Not 23, not 21, 22 minutes. And that's the fastest way that you can clean that floor tile. Lots of things I'm going to tell you today, which are all focused on cost and efficiency. It builds up its store network one by one, knowing that it will build very, very fast its buying power. Have a look at some maths. Tesco sales, I won't take Musgraves, it's just too complicated to do with SKUs, but let's take Tesco because it's pretty easy to understand. Tesco sales in Ireland were 3 billion euros and they got 38,000 SKUs. 81,000 euros per SKU per year. Pretty simple set of maths. But we all know that when you're a full-line supermarket, actually the Pareto rule works. 80% of your sales come from 20% of your range. So let's take 80% of that 3 billion, it's 2.4, and 20% of the range is only 7,600 SKUs. They have 325,000 euros per SKU per year. Now look at Aldi. With half the sales, it's got 3 times the sale per SKU. Now imagine that scenario. There's 2 doors to this supplier's office. On one side stands of a private label supplier. On one side stands the Tesco guy, and he's offering maybe 325,000, and on the other side stands the Aldi guy. Today, the Aldi guy gets in first, because he offers more cash per SKU for a private label supplier than anybody else. And it doesn't need market dominance to be able to do it. In fact, in the UK, where Tesco had 30% market share with 40,000 SKUs, in 2008, Aldi passed Tesco in terms of buying power for private label SKU. And then the problems start for the industry. Because once you're the biggest buyer, you can largely get what you want. And what I mean by what you want is if you have 1,000 SKUs, which is a discounter's kind of mantra, you want to focus on 80% of the market. What you have to do is you have to try to get the most popular quality in every one of your SKUs possible. So when the Aldi organisation started in Ireland, it knew right from day one what that product range would be and what the benchmark was. It's pretty obvious. In tomato ketchup, it's chef. You've got to have that taste profile. You've got to have that size of the 300 ml squeezy bottle format, and it's got to taste and perform exactly like Chef. When you first come, you can't do it. You bring Heinz from the UK, or a copy of Heinz from the UK. You bring something from Germany called, that's close to a product called Felix. And a lot of consumers reject it at the beginning because it isn't exactly what they want. Once you have this buying power, you can largely, I won't say completely, but you can largely do what you want. Today in Ireland, Aldi have got real buying power. They exceed all other players in the market in terms of sales per SKU, and there are many who do business with those discounters in the room today. I think it's pretty good business in terms of getting paid, and there's a certain relationship and loyalty there. But for those who are on the competing end of that, the bad news is there's more pressure to come, because both companies have 170 pins in the map. Another feature of attacking a market like Ireland is that there is a master map done right before the market entry is started. There's pins in the map of where the stores are going to be, so that you don't end up buying one in the wrong place and then you can't put the 2 or 3 other options around it correctly. So there will be 340 of these discount stores, and if you calculate at the moment the market share is about 18%, it's going to reach 25%. It's a kind of racing certainty. But it's not all bad news. It's disruption. It's changing the margin expectation for the entire industry. But it's not all bad news, because once those 350 stores are here, they start to turn their attention on one another. And they need reasons why you would visit one discounter, not the other. And often, brands, especially famous brands, become those reasons. Because there are some products where the discounter cannot get exactly the quality product that it wants. I have a very interesting story to tell you about Kit Kat and Nestle a little bit later, but the private label industry is not able to do everything that the branded industry can do. Let's have a look at the players in the market here. You heard a little bit from Helen earlier. Dunnes, 51% private label with 7% of the market share on food, but already smaller than Lidl with 10.2% share. This adds up to 20. Someone else mentioned 18 earlier. I guess it depends whose information you take. This was from Planet Retail. The guys with Mace and Spar have got just a bit more than Lidl at 10.74, but only 23% of their business is done in private label, heavily weighted towards the convenience sector. So a lot of famous brands in those stores. Aldi, 91% private label and 10.79% share of the market. Tesco, 46%. But 22% of the whole market, and of course Super Value plus Co with 31%, and again with a big convenience business, so the private label percentage is lower. So quite a mixed bunch there, from 91 at the top down to 23 in the convenience sector. And you already heard a little bit about the different penetrations of the brands. And to be honest, it's really explainable when you start to think about category by category. For those of you who produce beers and spirits, for a long time now, you've lived with very low profit margins. Low for everybody. For the retailer, the only person who really gets money out of beers and spirits is the government with their huge duties that they charge. Because those industries have a low profit margin, there is just not the lust to invest in private label factories and facilities. There's not the interest from the retailers to develop their private labels in this area because there's just not enough money to justify it. Personal care, it's a little bit different. For the men in the audience, if you've ever asked your wife what does she pay for a hair coloring or her shampoo, I'm almost sure that you got the response, mind your own business. It's nothing to do with you and it's nothing to do with how much money we're spending. We can afford it, I'm worth it, blah, blah, blah. We'll feed the kids private label porridge oats, but I'm not compromising on any kind of beauty product. That's just how the world works. So very difficult for a retailer to break into that category with product. Also, it's quite difficult in cleaning because you're going to invest some money anyway in these cleaning products, and you really want to be sure that it works and the branded products have a superior performance over cheap stuff that you've bought in the past. I'll tell you an interesting story which just shows you how smart the consumer is. When Aldi wants to enter into a new country and it's not 100% sure, it sends the executive who's supposed to make the recommendation and do the spade work, it sends them to live for 10 days with a typical family in that country. So I got to go and live in the Czech Republic with just a typical normal family. The husband was a train driver, the wife was a teacher. The average salary in the Czech Republic is about 800 euros a person, and the costs are as high as here if you live in Prague. So it ain't an easy life. You know what I found this very smart lady who was a teacher doing? She bought the best washing powder on the market. She bought Persil, and she washed her husband's shirts and her best clothes in Persil. And for the bed sheets, for the kids' clothes or whatever, she bought a cheap private label one, and she washed other products in that. I mean, how smart is that? When you really think about that, she was prepared to buy two products and just do different jobs with them, because she didn't trust these expensive shirts because he had to buy his own shirts to sit on this branded train and be a train driver, and she was making sure that they didn't get in any way compromised. That just kind of proved to me how smart the consumer is. Pet food, really difficult category for private label operators. Why? Because you can't taste it. You don't know what it's doing. Is his hair going to fall out? Is the cat going to be happy? Better not chance it. Give the kids the porridge oats. We'll see, they'll tell you if they're yuck. But the cat, no, the cat gets whiskers. Cooked meat, paper, it becomes a little bit easier. Dairy, well, there was an interesting slide from Helen earlier about milk that tastes nice. Can you taste the milk in your tea? Can you, bugger? Can you taste the tea in your porridge? Can you, bugger? If you're going to drink milk, I understand it. So I can see why, for different missions, people will buy a cheaper product because it just gets used a little bit differently. And the real target of the private label business, the dry and tin packaged grocery business. If you can copy something, if you can really produce something reasonably easily, then private label is going to be camping on your front lawn. So how should these brands fight back against all of this market disruption that Aldi and Lidl, and the reaction to Aldi and Lidl, how should they fight back? Because what typically happens, and Ireland is really no different to Austria, Germany, Switzerland, Australia, UK, everything is behaving in the same way, so I can kind of predict, I think, what's going to happen next, is that the discounters come along, grab a chunk of market share at a much lower price than the rest of the industry. The supermarkets respond largely with private label product, which also means that the whole market is pressurized. There is a certain equilibrium achieved after the discounters have finished with their expansion. And then brands start to become more important again because they can become the differentiator between the businesses. So, to be one of those differentiators, you heard a little bit the story in the previous presentation. Your product needs to be unique. It needs to have difficult to copy selling points. If it doesn't, if it's easy to copy, you're in trouble. You better think about another strategy. You can use provenance and history. If you have the oldest tradition in a particular product, then there's really a chance that your product has a more emotional attachment to the consumer. You need new products. Aldi, for example, has, I told you, 1,000 SKUs. It actually has 1,700 products, but it mixes them in the case. So you can find 3 flavor variants in one case and it calls it one SKU. So there's actually 1,700 products in these 1,000 SKUs, but they're just flavor variants of the same item. And they will change out of that 1,000, 110 items every year. That's actually a big percentage. There's always something new to find in an Aldi store. One of the reasons they do it is there isn't much excitement around the price. That stays the same all the time. They just keep one in, one out program of new product development. So the brand has got to do the same. Every time you launch a product, think about it, it's already out of date. I need the next one. You've got to tell a story. Marketing is really, really important for brands. If you want to stand out, you've got to shout about it. You can sell your product to the discounters and bargain stores. That really works, and the time for really thinking about that is now, because by the time they mature, and it's only going to take them another 2 or 3 years to do that, they actually want some kind of differentiator. You've got to be there and ready with your product. You really can sell a bit of Ireland to the world. And you can sell your product to the discounters. I want to tell you about 3 brands I'm personally a bit of a fan of. The first one is these guys. I'm a bit of a chocoholic. I eat a little piece of chocolate every day. And these guys sell products inside that box that I haven't found anywhere else. They really are exceptional. I think there's the reason why this outfit manages to survive really well in otherwise what is a very competitive industry. It's got its own tourist attraction, so you can really get quite excited about this brand. And you find it in 60 airports and 40 different countries of the world. That's actually where I discovered it. I used to come here every month. I spent Monday to Friday here, and I was expected by the family to bring something home. And I discovered this product, and in the end I had to bring a bigger suitcase because all the family wanted a pack of this, a pack of that. I mean, in the end it became a bit of a nightmare, so thank you, butlers. I really like this product. I really like it. I mean, I like it a bit too much, to be honest. But what is really so special about this is every year there is a new product. Now, it says 18 years old on here, so somebody must have thought about that 18 years ago. Maybe it doesn't quite work like that. But the truth is, these guys are really good at making you feel good about buying your product. They target 25 to 45, I'd like to think, I'm not. 25 to 45 ambitious social males. And I can even picture this guy. He's got a square chin, he's got a square forehead, his hair looks just fantastic. I mean, it's Brian O'Driscoll. I just know it is. But that's how they make you think that you're more like Brian O'Driscoll if you order one of these somewhere in your drinking sensibly, of course. They spend 80 million a year, 80 million euros peddling this story. Respect, really respect. That brand is supposed to be worth, if you read in these marketing newspapers, 1.7 billion. That's cool. But it's not all about the big boys. I also am a big fan of this kind of idea. Have you ever tried this product? Yes. It is top notch. I mean, it really is super. It's a crisp. It's an outrageous price. I didn't get change of €5 buying these 2 packs this afternoon. But it's worth it because it is just a really, really nice experience. And what is it? That's a bit of Ireland. It's potato. I don't know how many sons there are, but I've seen some kind of advert. There must be 20 of the damn guys, all lined up on the farm gate, all somehow involved. They all look good. I'm sure if there was a program, How to Marry a Farmer, these guys would have 100 candidates. Really, respect to these guys. In an area where you can copy the category, but they stand out. You don't have to be big. Everybody's got to start somewhere. You just have to have a great idea, and you have to stick to the concept and drive it through. I'd like to tell you a little bit about how a retailer thinks, because I was constantly surprised by reactions from my my buying teams about how badly prepared suppliers were for interactions. And I hear it across all kinds of industries where the supplier does not really understand the retailer, or worse, the supplier doesn't actually understand the customer. First of all, let's just deal with the retailer. The retailer, by the way, is your route to market. It doesn't matter who you are or what you are, the retailer is just simply the way in which you get the product to the customer. And it's good to understand that not all retailers are the same. If you're working for Tesco or SuperValu or Spar and Mace, of course they have their own little cultures, but in principle, they will think about, how can I sell more? I'll get promoted if I sell more. I'll get a bigger bonus if I sell more. People will pat me on the back. I'll get recognized if I sell more. And they adopt modern marketing methods, which means that they really think about the consumer's needs, and they try to have an option for every consumer's need possible. That's where it all starts. It starts with some kind of fancy marketing tree, but in the end, there is a need, and I have to get a product available for the customer to meet that need. A discounter is a completely different animal. And what a discounter thinks about? Thinks about costs. Thinks about, how can I organize things cheaper, with lower costs, with less hours, it celebrates ideas which take cost out of the business. I'll tell you a great story, which I just know that somebody in Tesco or SuperValu would never stand up and talk about. There was a store manager in the UK who invented a new concept. He worked out, and he measured it, that his staff, who were pretty normal human beings, went to the toilet 1.8 times per day during the working shift. And he thought, I tell you what we're going to do. John, when you go to the loo, you go down that aisle and take all the empty cardboard boxes with you, and I'm putting from tomorrow, the cardboard compactor right next to the toilets. Jane, you go down that aisle, and John, you go down that aisle. You would not believe over 9,000 stores, over 365 days a year, how much money that saved. Because that was previously an operation that had to be done, and now it was being done for kind of free. That's what the discounter thinks about. It thinks about how it can shave a few seconds off the functions of every store. Did you ever pick up a discounter package, private label? It's got a barcode, twice the size, with only 8 lines on it, and it's on every selling face of the packet, so that the cashier doesn't turn it over to scan it, because that cost some seconds to try to find the barcode. She just whizzes it across. I mean, you can't believe the detail that these guys will go into to try to reduce the costs of running the business. When they reduce the costs, they are able to bring the price down, and the price gap that they open up is what drives the sales. When a discounter has 20% price differential, it's like pouring petrol on its sales. It's like rocket fuel. When that price gap is closed to 12%, the sales stop altogether, defecting from elsewhere. Because what a discounter can't offer is choice. It has one version of everything. It has one ketchup, one mayonnaise, one of every customer's needs. It has no duplication whatsoever. And for some customers, you already heard a little bit about the facts. For actually 4/5 of customers, that choice is only palatable, or lack of choice is only palatable if the price differential is great enough. So a discounter, what it really needs from its suppliers is knowledge. You are expected to understand the customer. You are expected to present the case to say, here is a customer need, and if you buy my product, you will fulfill it. Of course, you have to understand that the discounter will want the product presented in a certain way with a certain kind of tray so that their business is very simple to manage. But you are expected to understand the consumer and bring the idea. And they're willing to change more than 10% of their range every year. So there's not a problem with getting in there. You just got to have the business case for your product. By the way, that's the same for any retailer. You have to be an expert in your category. These guys generally these days are covering several categories. There cannot be as good a knowledge base as you have, and so you can fill the void and present your case. You should research constantly to find the new gaps and never rest. Keep upgrading products. Quick story about Weetabix. Weetabix is an incredibly simple product to make. Really, honestly, we could figure it out in an hour and all do it ourselves now. So what these guys did, because they have a very good business, is they said, you know what, private label's going to kill us if we're not careful. We'll buy it all. We'll go around and we'll buy all the big factories. Then we'll own it, and we'll upgrade the private label Weetabix so it's the same product that we make. And the really clever piece is we'll invent a new product every 6 months, and we'll say to the discounter, you can have that in private label, but not straight away. We'll do the brand, we'll get the benefit from that, and eventually I'll turn it into private label for you to prevent you going elsewhere because you get an inferior product. Very successful long-term strategy. For a very easily copyable product, Weetabix deliver both their own brand and the private label into all the discounters in the UK, and they have a good profit and a good sales position. I was asked some questions by Nif about partner adversary from the retail standpoint. And I'd like to tell you a little story about Nestle. It's a very interesting story because I tell you what we couldn't do in an hour. We couldn't figure out how to make Kit Kat. Kit Kat is an incredibly difficult product. That wafer, that chocolate, not letting them run into one another, it's really, really complex. I tried, I promise you, for 10 years I tried to get a private label Kit Kat and I could never do it. So, the same for my colleagues in Germany, and in the end they had such a difficulty, they managed to list Kit Kat in Germany, and I thought, okay, I'll give up. I'll call the branded guy and tell him, I can't make the product as well as yours. Please deliver me your product. He wouldn't answer my calls. For 5 years, he wouldn't answer my calls. 5 years. So then, I should have thought of it earlier. I had the bright idea to tell the German business, order 20 more trucks and just send them to me. So they had English on the pack. Kit Kat is the same in Germany. It's a little bit more German language on pack, but the English was there, so it was legal. And in I bought Kit Kat and started selling it. Well, the complaints started. The complaint started because chocolate in Germany has a hazelnut taste. And Kit Kat are smart enough to reflect that, so it's a completely different recipe. So customers bought it in my stores and then wrote back to Nestle to say, the product's not right, it tastes funny, it's off. And they suddenly had a massive rise in complaints. And then we had the MD of Nestle UK phoning me up. And after hearing for 5 years previously that he wouldn't answer my calls and that he'd never heard of this company, Aldi UK, I said, Nestle? Nestle? Never heard of you. And put the phone down. It's a bit of a party piece, but the reality is, you see, that was done from both sides. One of the things that I would criticize the retail and supplier relationship for is not getting together at the senior levels more often. Just to talk about each other's issues and goals to try to align those possibilities. Of course, there is some adversarial scenarios there, but getting together and talking about it makes you understand a little bit better the partnership necessary to make the whole thing work. Do retailers care about long-term supplier relationships? You bet they do. Really, they do, especially if you have a product their customers want. Never forget that. The retailer needs your products, and there's some very good examples here. Haribo is a very successful candy product. The Aldi and Lidl organization don't do a private label simply because it's very convenient to do business with the Haribo guys. Do retailers think about trademark and intellectual property? Not really. They'll copy it to whatever's legal. That's just life. And what's the most single and most important thing that a brand operator can do to be successful? Have personality. Be unique. Be difficult to copy. Thanks very much.